Good morning. President Biden has been missing in action on the debt ceiling, refusing to negotiate and putting our economy and the livelihoods of hardworking American families at risk. Even House Democrats are demanding that President Biden enter debt ceiling negotiations with Speaker McCarthy. House Republicans will pass a sensible debt ceiling solution that limits Washington's irresponsible spending, saves taxpayer dollars, and grows the American economy. President Biden must work with us, who represent the American people, to address our nation's spending and debt crisis. First, before we hear from some of my colleagues on the debt ceiling negotiation, I wanted to highlight two of our incredible members, Congresswoman Kim and Congresswoman Steele, to discuss the upcoming joint address by our ally, President Yoon of the Republic of Korea, celebrating the 70th anniversary of our critical alliance. I'll first turn it over to Representative Young Kim.
Thank you, Liz. I'm Congresswoman Young Kim, and I serve as chairwoman of the Indo-Pacific Subcommittee on House Foreign Affairs Committee, and also as co-chair of the Congressional Study Group on Korea. I'm honored to join my colleagues today as we welcome South Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol to Washington, and also this is the year where we mark the 70th years of the U.S. Republic of Korea alliance. I'm especially excited to hear President Yoon's remarks at the joint session of Congress tomorrow. The United States Republic of Korea alliance is based on shared values of human rights, democracy, freedom, and a rules-based international order. While the security challenges the region faces have changed since the Korean War, our commitment to these values have not. As authoritarians in the Indo-Pacific region like Kim Jong-un and Xi Jinping seek to rattle the bilateral and steadfast commitment, our alliance is not only important, it's necessary to counter rising threats and aggression in the Indo-Pacific. So why does this matter? Well, take a look at South Korea at night versus North Korea. South Korea is a friend in freedom, democracy, and human rights. Freedom must prevail over oppression. As a Korean American who grew up in South Korea in the aftermath of the Korean War and with relatives who defected North Korea, I know firsthand the evils of oppression. So I'm proud to represent the vibrant Korean American community in Southern California and to be one of the first Korean American women to serve in Congress. As a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I'm committed to strengthening our relationships with allies, holding authoritarian regimes accountable, and uplifting freedom-loving people trapped under their regime. Thank you. And now I yield to Congresswoman Michelle Steele.
Thank you, Young. This week is monumental for Korean Americans. President Yoon's historic visit is the first time in over a decade that the President of South Korea has spoken to a joint session of Congress. I was born in Korea, grew up in Japan, and immigrated to the United States when I was 19 years old. For me and my constituents, the friendship between the United States and the Republic of Korea is valuable beyond measure. That is why I introduced the bipartisan, bicameral resolution to welcome President Yoon to the United States and honor the 70th anniversary of the Mutual Defense Treaty between our two nations. Our relationship is critical in preserving peace and stability in the region, and our trade partnership is vital to both of our economies. President Yoon has worked hard to improve relations with Japan, which is important to ensure our three nations may work together to protect freedom and democracy. I am honored to join my colleagues in introducing this resolution to recommit to our shared bond between country of my birth and the country I am so blessed to call home. Thank you, and I'm going to invite Chairman Arrington.
Thank you, Rep. Steele. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jody Arrington. I'm from West Texas, the food, fuel, and fiber capital of the world. I'm honored to serve as budget chairman, and I can summarize the fiscal state of the nation. It's bleak, and the path forward is very, very uncertain. Nobody can look at the balance sheet of our federal government or the nonpartisan CBO's budget outlook and not shudder at the rapid deterioration of our nation's financial health. No responsible leader in this country worth their salt would, in a debt limit situation and negotiation where we look at our nation's indebtedness and its impact on the financial health of our country and our children's future, and not do something about it. What we're asking President Biden to do is to do what he did when he was vice president. Do what he did simply when he was in the Senate. Come to the table and put common sense spending controls and fiscal reforms as we raise the debt ceiling, pay our bills, and protect the good faith and credit of the United States. Folks in West Texas, and I imagine across the country, see that as pretty straightforward, especially, Madam Chair, as they suffer under the effects of the $10 trillion in spending over the last 2 years, $6 trillion added to the national debt, record inflation, soaring interest rates, and a nosedive into recession. That is the reality of the rest of America. And so they're tightening their belts, and they're changing their spending habits, and by God, the people in this town who represent this great nation, who are responsible for funding this government, need to do the same. I was at the Rules Committee hearing last night, 6 hours, required all the stamina I could muster and patience. But I think there are a few things that are noteworthy that I would like to share with you. Number one, I didn't hear any of my Democrat colleagues challenging or pushing back on the substance of our debt ceiling proposal. I think it's that straightforward. I think it's that common sense to right-size the bureaucracy coming out of COVID. Go back to 4 months ago where we were spending just 4 months ago. Obama's last year of his budget had us spending at that level. So I think there's consensus that that is extremely reasonable. And then you got the list of reversing some of the reckless spending items like the student loan cancellation, the army of IRS agents and the like. But I didn't get any pushback last night substantively on what we have been presenting. Secondly, I didn't hear a single Democrat offer up in 6 hours an alternative item of savings. We're at $1.5 trillion in annual deficits today. That's what we're borrowing. We'll be at $3 trillion in 10 years. We're at $500 billion in interest payments. We'll triple that in 10 years and be paying $1.5 trillion. And not one time in 6 hours of this conversation about how we right size, how we get on the right track that is sustainable and responsible, and not one alternative. Just a bunch of boogeymen, just a bunch of phantom funding cuts that they rolled out there. It was sad because it was a party that's lost its way, that has lurched so far to the left, they can't even come back to the common sense Clinton era work requirements for able-bodied adults. I saw them have a death grip on the blank check and the status quo, and they will lose that fight. They will lose that fight with the American people. It's not about me. It's not about these guys. It's about the American people. Lastly, this one, I get emotional about it. So, but because it's real. This is real. The most vulnerable group in America, in my mind, and there are lots of vulnerable groups, and we have to be responsible, and we have to prioritize. That's what this is about, prioritizing. But it's also about protecting the future as we prioritize, and our children's future. I think the most vulnerable group in America are the children that have no place in this town, no lobbyists to speak of that I know of, no seat around the table, it feels like, and they're going to inherit $31 trillion in debt and counting. Who's going to speak up for them? This is what they will inherit, and somebody's got to speak up. But in 6 hours, and I close with this, in 6 hours, and you'll never invite me back to another one of these press hearings, but in 6 hours, I heard a lot of stakeholders in government programs and government funding. I heard a lot of groups and communities. I never once, and I said this at the hearing, if you listen to the 6 hour tape, not one time did my Democrat colleagues mention the children and grandchildren of the people here, the future generation of Americans who will inherit the whirlwind because of the seeds that were sown of reckless spending and an insatiable appetite to spend this country into bankruptcy. So I'm going to support this limit, save, grow, obviously, and it's a responsible thing to do. It's the right thing to do, and I pray to God that we'll get our president, respecting him in the office, to come to the table and be a leader worthy of the citizens of the United States of America.
We will now hear from our whip, Tom Emmer.
Hold the applause. Hold the applause. House Republicans are going to pass this debt limit. We are going to show that people the American government doesn't have to be dysfunctional. And by the way, we're also going to show that Republicans, House Republicans under Kevin McCarthy, are the ones that are continuing to lead. We're going to pass this because the alternative is far worse. Don't be fooled. There is no such thing as a clean debt ceiling increase. That's about as dirty as it gets. Handing Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden a blank check for more of their reckless spending that's driving inflation and destroying family finances that Jody was just talking about. With this transformational bill, House Republicans have the opportunity to effect change and implement reforms, all while avoiding default. Joe Biden and Senate Democrats have done absolutely nothing but obstruct. Members of Biden's own party now want him to do the responsible thing and negotiate. Instead, what's he doing? He's already threatening a veto. He is playing with Americans' lives and the economic health of our nation, all in the name of his political theater. It's truly disgusting and revolting. Our members built this legislation from the ground up, and our members are going to pass it. House Republicans, again, are the only ones that are armed with solutions to this problem. It's time for Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer to show us what they're made of. And now, I'm going to turn it over to the Tiger from Louisiana, our majority leader.
Thank you, Whip. This is a critically important week for the future direction of our country. For too long, and especially over the last 2 years, we've seen Washington go on a spending spree unlike anything in our nation's history. Joe Biden has maxed out the nation's credit card. And now at this moment, where the credit card is maxed out, Joe Biden has gone into hiding, trying to run out the clock and create a debt crisis, demanding not that we address the spending problem that maxed out the credit card, but believe it or not, Joe Biden is demanding that he get another card to go max out. No family in America would run their household that way. And frankly, I think when you look at the polls and see how low Joe Biden's numbers are, nobody in America thinks that this is the responsible way for the commander-in-chief to lead this country. But if Joe Biden won't lead, House Republicans will. And that's why you will see us pass a bill this week to address the debt ceiling, but also at the same time to address the spending problem that brought us to this moment. I think people are hungry for this moment. They're hungry for this kind of leadership. You've seen it from Speaker McCarthy. Jody Arrington, whose bill it is, to all of us on this leadership team who have been working for weeks and months with all of our members representing every part of our conference. Anybody willing to bring ideas to the table, and there have been some really good ideas, and if you look at this package, it represents the most common sense, straightforward approach to addressing the spending problem that got us here as we confront the debt ceiling. Think about this, basic work requirements. You know, the voters of Wisconsin just a few weeks ago were asked this question: should people have to try to find work in order to get welfare benefits? Do you know that 79.9% of Wisconsin voters just a few weeks ago on a statewide ballot said absolutely yes? People understand that. At a time when every worker, every small business is looking for workers, President Biden is paying billions of dollars to pay people not to work. So when we say let's have some basic work requirements, we're not talking about small numbers. It's over $100 billion of savings that the taxpayers would get. That single mom that's working 2 or 3 jobs right now to make ends meet under this tough economy, she doesn't want to have to pay for somebody who's sitting at home working who's fully able-bodied. And the important thing of bringing some of these important common sense measures like work requirements is not only does it save taxpayers money who are working hard, it also helps shore up programs like Social Security. We'll be able to put tens of billions of dollars back into Social Security, a program that Joe Biden has undermined with his reckless policies. We strengthen those programs by putting basic work requirements back in place. These aren't new ideas. These are ideas that Bill Clinton agreed with a Republican Congress to do back in the 1990s, and it worked, and it will work again. These are proven solutions to this nation's spending problem. And so we're proud to bring this bill forward. We're proud to get this bill passed this week. But it's long past time that President Biden stop hiding, stop trying to run the clock out. It's been over 2 months since he said he would sit down with Speaker McCarthy again and meet, and yet he's refused to do that. You now have a growing drumbeat of Democrats who are saying that it's time for President Biden to sit down with Speaker McCarthy. The country knows we can't stay on this unsustainable path. And if Joe Biden's not willing to lead and do something about it, House Republicans are. That starts this week. With that, we'll be happy to take some questions. Chad.
This is kind of the dress rehearsal for what comes later this summer when the Senate gets a hold of this, and then also what happens with the president. With that concern, though, if it's that hard to get your side in order and not have to do this last-minute maneuvering, what does that portend for the summer, and does that give confidence to the market?
I wouldn't call it hard as much as thoughtful. There has been a lot of hard work that's gone into how best to start this negotiation. Speaker McCarthy, again, over 2 months ago, did get the opportunity to sit down with President Biden. It would be a lot easier if Democrats were actually part of this conversation. You know, the American people have been part of this for a long time because they do this every day in their household. They figure out how to make ends meet with the dollars that they take in. This federal government, under President Biden, when Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer were running everything for the last 2 years, have gotten us to a point that for every $100 that comes in, the government is spending $129. You can't keep doing that. And so we would really like it. It'd be a lot easier if President Biden was sitting at the table with the speaker saying, okay, let's come up with ideas of how to solve this problem. But because they walked away from the table, we said, we're not going to just sit back and run the clock out like President Biden. We're going to do it on our own. And so this bill represents a lot of really good ideas. If they've got better ideas, as Chairman Arrington said, not one idea was presented by Democrats yesterday. Not one concern for the young people of America who will pay this tab was expressed by Democrats. But we care about that. Yeah, there were some technical changes to address dates and alignment. If you look at the tax credits, for example, in the initial draft, it repealed all of the tax credits, but some of those tax credits were not part of the IRA, that legislation. Some were actually in place before that, so the intention wasn't to get rid of all of those, just the ones that were created in the IRA. And if you look at the scoring, it was really focused on that. So those clarifications were made to address that. then on the work requirements, if you looked, there were three main components, SNAP, TANF. Not all of them aligned up on the same dates of implementation, so we wanted to make sure they all aligned on the same dates of implementation. So the good news is that we can vote as early as today on this. We're going to bring the rule shortly, 1:30. We'll be bringing the rule vote, which allows us then to bring the bill up, and it addresses the changes that were made. So we'll be ready to move as early as today. I wouldn't, tune out C-SPAN today if you're watching. We want to get this done as soon as possible, but more importantly, we want President Biden to finally start getting engaged in this process. You ask for the job of President of the United States to be not only the commander-in-chief, but also the leader of the free world. This is not a job where you run and hide when the going gets tough. This is the time where you step up. These are the moments that you come and run for these jobs to solve big problems. And I'm disappointed that the president is trying to run and hide during these toughest moments. And again, you're seeing Democrats. Each day over the last week, you've seen more and more Democrats coming out saying, President Biden's got to start negotiating with Speaker McCarthy. And I think you'll see that drumbeat even louder after we pass this bill. We'll do one more question. Okay, yeah, we'll let the whip